Good evening. My name is Joe Finn. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance, which is an advocacy, policy, and program development group with the sole mission of ending homelessness in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And our innovation is a Housing First program for chronic homeless individuals called Home and Healthy for Good. But before I go any further, I want to take this opportunity to thank Root Cause and our sponsor, the Highland Street Foundation, for giving me this opportunity to tell you about this new and exciting innovation. For the past 30 years, the approach of the Commonwealth to the issue of homelessness has been emergency shelter. And that approach has resulted in what? More shelters and more homelessness. And if you think about it, in any other industry, where would that kind of outcome or return on investment be acceptable? Not too many, I think. But there's good news. And I think we've heard a lot of good news this evening. But there is good news in the fact that there's a new spirit and a new approach to ending homelessness. And many, both public policy and also various nonprofit organizations serving the homeless, are starting to make this move towards an approach that is generically referred to as Housing First. And Home and Healthy for Good and the Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance has been a leader in moving people in that specific direction. I want to tell you a little bit about how I got to that point. And actually, I had an epiphany regarding homelessness back in the mid-1990s, thanks in great part to a homeless, mentally ill woman, a very serious mentally ill woman who was living on the streets of Quincy at a time when I was running a little shelter in Quincy called Father Bill's Place. And we'll just call her Mary, but Mary would only come to the shelter every 2 weeks. She was living out in a place we call the Weeds in Quincy. And she'd come in every 2 weeks maybe to shower or to grab a meal, and she'd always make it very clear that the one thing she didn't want were services. And so, after being there a year or so, I wrote this grant, a housing grant, to house the homeless mentally ill. It was called Shelter Plus Care, a federal grant. And believe it or not, back when it was still a national competition, we won. So I was excited, and the first person I went to see was Mary. And I went and I said, Mary, great news. I have housing for you. And she goes, oh, Joe, that's fantastic. That's all I need, an apartment, a place to live. And I said, well, that's great, Mary. Well, I'll be able to give that to you. And I said, but Mary, there's only one catch. And she said, well, what's that? And I said, in order to get the housing, you have to be able to acknowledge that you're mentally ill. Well, immediately her happiness was replaced. She became very sad. She put her head down, and she was shaking her head, and she just said, no, Joe, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't lie just to get housing. Give it to somebody else who probably deserves it more than I do. But it was at that point where the epiphany occurred, because I suddenly realized that Mary wasn't solely responsible for her own homelessness. The system was. Because it didn't make sense. So I went to the people at Mental Health. I went to all the people who served Mary, and they said, hey, look, why does she have to acknowledge that she's mentally ill? Why can't we just put her in an apartment, keep an eye on her, and see how it works? Well, what happened? The first 2 weeks, she linked back up to mental health services. Within 3 weeks, she was back on medication. And I'm happy to report some 16 years later, she's living happily and independently on her own, garnering resources from the community. That was the inspiration for Home and Healthy for Good. That Home and Healthy for Good makes housing the primary objective. That we put housing up front and support the tendencies of chronic homeless persons, some of the most poorest and severely disabled people in the Commonwealth. And to date, the success has been great. We've housed over 400 individuals in the past 2 years. Of those 400 individuals, 30% of them came directly from the street. They had their average length of homelessness was nearly 6 years. And our retention rate for that housing to date is over 84%. But the most amazing thing, and why this is going to spur this revolution further in many respects, is that what we discovered is it's less costly than shelters and emergency resources. That the pre-housing costs compared to the post-housing costs are enormous. Medicaid alone, the individuals that we've served, a 68% reduction in Medicaid costs. So there is good news, and it's working. And I hope, and I have the 840 slide, and I hope that you will join us later for our breakout session. We like to say at the Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance, keys in homelessness. I hope that you will come and find out how you can become part of that movement to end homelessness and not simply manage it. Thank you.